Good evening. I'm Geoff Coleman. I'm Chief Medical Officer of Montgomery and Prince George's Hospice. And I want to thank Councilmember Will Jawando for coming and talking about our organization this evening. I am glad to see you again. I remember chatting with your father and you while he was at Casey House, and I remember meeting your brother. You had just finished at working at the Obama administration at the time, so welcome back.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you. It was, like I said, it was a surprise. I didn't know I was going to be being interviewed by you, but it was a nice surprise, so it's good to see you. It's hard to believe it's been almost 3 years.
Yeah, when I see you on TV, I always point at it and say, hey, I know him, so anyway, I wanted to know, how were you first introduced to Montgomery Hospice? How did you and your family come about that?
It was a circuitous path. I think I was typical of a lot of people that didn't really know what hospice was, other than knowing what the word was, and it was some sort of end-of-life care. I didn't really understand it, and it was really through just literally being at my wit's end, trying to find the best situation to make my dad be more comfortable. He, as with a lot of illnesses, he was in stage 4 prostate cancer that had spread throughout his body.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And on his spine in particular, and he was in severe pain. And so, anyone you love seeing in that much pain, you want to try to make it stop as quick as possible. And it was a bit of a journey. So, in talking with different doctors, because you want to try to fix the problem. Like, how do I make sure he's okay and he can have a longer life? And at some point, when you're realizing that is becoming more difficult, you're okay, well, what else can I do? And I think through that process, just literally Googling, I became aware of hospice and came upon your guys' page. And I think someone had recommended you to me. I can't remember who, but had mentioned that you all had done work in the county and in the area, and you had an outpatient facility, which was unique. So it was really just kind of word of mouth and then Googling.
Well, that's interesting. How did your family feel about hospice care, or tell us a little bit about them and what they thought about the whole experience too?
Yeah. Well, as you may remember, I'm only child, and so I think you met my dad's brother is what you meant.
Right, yes.
He would come from Nigeria to visit him. And so I had really been getting the brunt. My dad had lived with us for the last 6 years prior to him passing, when he first got diagnosed with cancer. And a lot of our family, were similar. They didn't understand why we had made the decision, because one of the things that I found, being the only child and being the primary caregiver, people don't know what you're going through on a daily basis, right? They remember, and so much can happen so quickly. They remember my dad 6 months prior to going into hospice, where he was moving around, doing his own thing. Might have been in pain a little bit now and then, but by the time we made the decision to go into hospice, he was paralyzed from the waist down. He couldn't walk.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it was a difficult conversation, because some people think, and I struggled with this too, that you're giving up, that you're saying that I'm just going to agree to let this loved one go and let him go. And so I think a lot of people were like, well, why are you moving to hospice? I just saw him. We shouldn't be at that point yet. So that was a difficult thing, both for me internally, but also for my dad and for just, family and friends who didn't know how bad it had gotten so quickly.
Were the staff able to communicate with you, or to honor his values, or share with you what was going on with him when he was at Casey House?
Yeah, it was helpful, and the staff was very, very helpful. We started out, and the first person I met that was affiliated with Montgomery Hospice was our in-home provider. We started out in in-home care.
Sure.
And through where someone would stop by, every day or every other day, and they brought the bed in and, got them comfortable in one of our side living rooms. And we did that for several weeks before we moved to Casey House. And I don't know if I think you knew that.
I remember that.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And so that initial, nurse was very helpful in kind of talking us through what was going to happen, what this meant, getting him on his initial medication to try to just get him out of constant pain, and then helping us through the process. And actually becoming okay, several weeks later with him transitioning to Casey House, right? Because, and I think, because that's you have to go through some mental processes to be okay with this transition. And the information they provided was very helpful.
Yeah, it's hard to change from being the caregiver, to one that's at the bedside and just being supportive and letting someone else take over at times. And so we were grateful to be able to do that. We always think it's a privilege to take care of people there. So after this entire experience, how has it affected you personally and professionally, what you think about end-of-life care?
Oh, it's had a tremendous impact. It's one of those things where, again, I didn't know a lot about it at the beginning, but I'm so thankful that my father had the opportunity to be cared for by people who knew what they were doing, had his comfort and his values and our family in mind throughout the process. And he actually, ended up being, as far as hospice terms go, he was there pretty long. He ended up being there, I think, 3.5 months or so.
He was, yes.
And as far as the financial side of it, and making sure that Medicare was doing what they needed to do, and just every aspect, the counselors that were there, the chaplains, I went there twice a day for 3 months. And anytime you get in that type of routine, you get to know people.
Right, I would see you quite frequently, yes.
And I brought my kids and my wife, and it allowed us the time and space to say goodbye in a way that he wasn't in constant pain. During that 3 months, we did a family tree. We had people visit from overseas. So, hindsight, it was a blessing, but it was very difficult. Obviously, you never want to see anyone pass. And that was the case. And I knew one day, every day when I would leave Casey House, I knew one day that would be the last day.
Sure.
And that was always sat with me. But I'm very thankful for the experience, and that's why I agreed to do this interview, because I think most people don't know, or they're scared, or they have misconceptions about what hospice is and what it can provide. And I'm hoping that more people will consider it an option.
Among the African American community, they're very suspicious of healthcare, especially at the end of life, and for good reason too, because of the history of how they have been treated in the healthcare system in the U.S. What would you say to that community, or to them, about hospice, Montgomery Hospice, Prince George's Hospice, end-of-life care in general?
I would say, look, I understand how you feel. I felt the same way. I think my dad felt the same way. I think we got to the point, we probably should have been in hospice several weeks before we got into hospice, to tell you the truth, because of the level of pain he was in. But once we got in and figured out what it was, and understood that just being comfortable was more important than trying to fight and navigate and look for some rare cure or some miracle, we knew that his disease had progressed. He had run the course of treatment. When he got diagnosed in 2011, they said, I think he has about 5 years, and that's about what happened. He actually got a little extra than that. And so I would just say that, learn about it, speak to people. You shouldn't jump into anything without knowing what it's about. But for us and for our family and for my dad, I know it allowed him some comfort in his last days. It allowed him to be with people that he hadn't seen in a long time, family and friends. He got to eat ice cream every day, which is something he denied himself.
Right, I remember that. Yes.
He was a very healthy eater, and so we kind of let it go at the...
Right. He was the best eater. I remember that. He really ate well to the very end until he couldn't. Yes.
Yeah, until he couldn't anymore. Yeah. But I just say try it. Learn from it. It was a great experience for us. I understand the suspicions, but at the end of the day, you want your loved ones to have a peaceful transition, and you want to be able to focus on spending time with them, not running around to doctors. I think seeing that. Like, I could have gone another way. We could have run around and tried to go to other doctors and figure out ways to, there was one doctor who said we can go and fuse his spine and do all these other things. But just the level of pain that he would have been in and the quality of his last several months would have been dramatically reduced. And like I said, we developed a document for my family, a family tree that was more extensive than anyone had ever done. And we did it just in the wall in his room on several pieces of paper. And we wouldn't have had the time and space to do that had he not been in hospice. And so, and then obviously with the care of medical professionals like yourself, dosing him right and checking on him and tending to wounds and all these other things that we didn't have the time and space to do. And for my family, we had 3 young children at the time. I've added another one since my dad passed, a baby boy, but allowing us to have a more regular schedule. Because when we were dealing with him at home, I had to get up, and turn him to every 2 hours. It was like having a baby, right? But an adult. And so that has impacts on him and on me, and so in our family. So it was also a relief to us to allow us to have a little more normalcy and to enjoy, not focus so much on the care for him, but the caring about him and spending time with him. And I think that's what hospice did. It allowed us to focus on being with him, sharing memories, as opposed to having to focus as much on the caregiver role, as you said earlier.
Well, I appreciate you allowing us to take care of him. I enjoyed him and you and your family tremendously when he was there. I'm sorry about the circumstances, but I was grateful to meet them. Thank you for trusting us.
I appreciate it, and thank you for what you all do. Several of the people, yourself included, were very helpful in the transition, and several of them came to the funeral, which I know is not always normal or advised, but we appreciated that. And because, like I said, because he had such a long stay there, he had developed some relationship with the staff. And I appreciate you all taking care of him and all that you do for so many families.
Thank you.